Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Fury. Rob Castellano had built his empire from concrete and steel, but more importantly, from an unshakable principle. Loyalty was everything, and betrayal was unforgivable. At 42, he controlled a construction dynasty worth hundreds of millions, with projects spanning 3 states. His hands, calloused from his early days swinging hammers, now signed contracts that could make or break entire neighborhoods. The divorce from Linda had been finalized 2 years ago, a bitter affair that left scars deeper than any physical wound. She'd taken half his liquid assets, a staggering $47 million, but Rob had hidden the true extent of his wealth behind a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. What she didn't know couldn't hurt him, but what she'd done to him would never be forgotten. Their son Tyler, now 13, was the only light in Rob's increasingly dark world. Every other weekend, the boy would stay at Rob's penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, and they'd work on model cars or discuss Tyler's dreams of becoming an architect. The kid had inherited Rob's strategic mind and attention to detail, qualities that would serve him well in the war Rob sensed was coming. "Dad, do I really have to go to this thing?" Tyler asked, adjusting his tie in the passenger seat of Rob's black Porsche Cayenne. They were heading to the River Club, an upscale venue where Linda was hosting a pre-wedding gathering for her upcoming nuptials. "Your mother specifically requested you be there, son. We honor our commitments, even when they're uncomfortable." Rob's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The invitation had been a surprise. Linda rarely included him in anything anymore. Her upcoming marriage to some businessman named David Morrison was supposed to be her fresh start, her escape from the toxic influence of her ex-husband. Rob had done his homework on Morrison. 45 years old, divorced twice, claimed to run import-export businesses across several states. Clean background check, decent financials, no obvious red flags. Still, something fell off. In Rob's experience, people who appeared too clean usually had the dirtiest secrets. "I just don't get why she wants you there, too," Tyler muttered, staring out the window at the approaching venue. "She hates you." "Your mother doesn't hate me, Tyler. She fears me. There's a difference." Rob's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who'd learned to read people's deepest motivations. Fear keeps people honest, or at least it keeps them careful. The River Club sat on a bluff overlooking the water, its colonial architecture speaking of old money and older secrets. Rob had actually helped finance the renovation 3 years ago, another fact Linda probably didn't know. As they walked toward the entrance, Rob noticed Tyler's pace slowing, his shoulders tensing. "You okay, kid?" "Yeah, can we make this quick?" Rob studied his son's profile. Tyler was usually eager to see his mother, despite the complicated family dynamics. Tonight felt different. The boy seemed nervous, almost frightened. Rob filed the observation away. In his world, fear was information, and information was power. The lobby buzzed with Linda's usual crowd: art gallery owners, fashion designers, and trust fund kids who'd never worked a real day in their lives. Rob moved through them like a shark through minnows, his presence commanding respect even from those who pretended to despise him. He'd worn his best charcoal suit, the one that made him look like he could buy and sell everyone in the room without checking his bank balance. Linda appeared near the bar, radiant in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. At 38, she maintained the elegant beauty that had first captured Rob's attention in college. Her auburn hair was styled in perfect waves, and her smile was practiced and warm, at least until she saw him. "Robert, thank you for coming." Her voice carried the polite chill of expensive diplomacy. "Wouldn't miss it, Linda. Where's the lucky man? I'm eager to meet the person who finally captured your heart." The words carried just enough sincerity to hide the blade beneath them. Before Linda could respond, Tyler grabbed Rob's arm with surprising force. The boy's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with something that looked disturbingly like terror. "What's wrong?" Rob asked, his paternal instincts overriding everything else. Tyler's voice came out as a trembling whisper. "We're leaving now." He grabbed Rob's hand and began pulling him toward the exit with desperate urgency. Tyler, what? Now, Dad. Please. Chapter 2. The Face of Truth. Rob allowed his son to drag him outside, every parental alarm bell in his head screaming. In 13 years, he'd never seen Tyler this scared. Not during thunderstorms, not when he'd broken his arm falling from a tree, not even during the worst fights between Rob and Linda before the divorce. They reached Rob's car in silence, Tyler's hands shaking as he fumbled with the door handle. Rob helped him into the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel, not starting the engine, but turning to face his son directly. Tyler, talk to me. What happened in there? The boy was staring straight ahead, his breathing shallow and rapid. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. Do you know who Mom's fiancé is? The question hit Rob like a physical blow. Something in Tyler's tone, the way he said fiancé like it was a curse word, made Rob's blood run cold. His name is David Morrison. Beyond that, no. Should I? Tyler turned to face him, tears starting to form in his eyes. Dad, that's not his real name. That's Danny Martinez. He used to be your best friend. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Danny Martinez. Rob hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in over 15 years, but it still had the power to transport him back to the worst period of his life. Danny, his college roommate, his best man, his business partner in those early days when they'd been young and hungry and foolish enough to trust each other completely. Danny, who'd stolen not just money from their first construction project, but Rob's girlfriend at the time. Danny, who disappeared one night with their company's seed money and Rob's fiancée, leaving behind only debts and betrayal. Danny, who Rob had sworn to destroy if he ever saw again. You're sure? Rob's voice was barely above a whisper. Tyler nodded miserably. He recognized me first. At Mom's book club meeting last month. He kept staring at me, and then he asked Mom about my last name. When she said Castellano, he got this weird look. Then he started asking questions about you. What you did for work, where you lived, if you ever talked about your college friends. Rob felt something dark and familiar awakening in his chest. The same cold fury that had driven him to build his empire brick by brick, deal by deal, victory by ruthless victory. But this was different. This was personal in ways that transcended business or money. Did he say anything to you directly? He tried to be friendly, kept asking about school, about our weekends together. But there was something wrong about it, like he was studying me. Tyler wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Mom doesn't know, does she? About who he really is. Rob started the engine, his mind already racing through possibilities and plans. Danny had always been smart, changing his name, building a new identity, working his way into Linda's life. But why? Was this random coincidence? Or had Danny specifically targeted Linda to get to Rob? The answer became clear as they pulled away from the River Club. This wasn't coincidence. This was revenge, delayed, calculated, and striking at the one thing Rob cared about more than his empire, his family. Dad! Tyler's voice was small and scared. What are we going to do? Rob reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder, feeling the boy's tension slowly ease under his touch. We're going to protect what's ours, son. And we're going to make sure that some debts that are 15 years overdue, finally get paid in full. As they drove through the darkening city, Rob began to construct the framework of Danny's destruction. The man had made one critical error. He'd revealed himself too early. He'd assumed Tyler wouldn't recognize him or understand the significance. But Tyler was Rob's son, raised to notice details, to remember faces, to understand that in the Castellano family, loyalty was everything and betrayal was a death sentence. Danny Martinez had returned from the shadows to claim his revenge. What he didn't know was that Rob Castellano had spent 15 years becoming someone far more dangerous than the young man he'd once betrayed. And unlike Danny's patient, indirect approach, Rob's revenge would be swift, total, and absolutely merciless. The game was about to begin, and Rob intended to win. Chapter 3. Gathering Intelligence. Rob's penthouse office occupied the entire top floor of the Castellano Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city he'd helped reshape. It was 3 a.m., but sleep was impossible. Tyler was safe in the guest bedroom, exhausted by the emotional trauma of the evening, while Rob worked at his desk surrounded by documents, photographs, and computer screens. Marcus Wong, Rob's head of security and information gathering, sat across from him with a stack of files. A former Army intelligence officer, Marcus had been with Rob for 8 years and understood that some questions weren't asked. Only orders were followed. Danny Martinez legally changed his name to David Morrison 7 years ago in Nevada. Marcus reported, his voice clinical and precise. Clean paperwork, all official channels. But here's where it gets interesting. He's been operating under at least 3 other identities in the past decade. Rob studied the photographs Marcus had compiled. Danny had aged well, his dark hair now touched with distinguished gray at the temples, his face carrying the confident ease of a successful businessman. But the eyes were the same, calculating, predatory, and utterly without conscience. What's his angle? Money. Partly. Your ex-wife is worth approximately $52 million post-divorce. But there's more. Marcus opened another file. He's been methodically researching you for at least 2 years. Property records, business filings, social media posts from your employees and associates. This isn't opportunistic. It's a long-term operation. Rob felt the familiar coldness settling over him, the emotional shutdown that preceded his most ruthless business decisions. Family, no blood relatives we can find. Divorced twice, no children. His current identity shows businesses in import-export, but they're mostly shells hiding his real income sources. Which are? Marcus hesitated, the first time Rob had ever seen him do so. Identity theft, credit fraud, and what appears to be a sophisticated romance scam operation. He targets wealthy divorced women, gains their trust, marries them, and systematically drains their assets before disappearing. The revelation hit Rob like a physical blow. Linda wasn't Danny's target. She was his next victim. This wasn't about revenge against Rob. It was about money, pure and simple. Danny had likely discovered Linda's divorce settlement and identified her as his next mark. How many others? At least 4 that we can document. Total theft estimated at over $20 million across 15 years. Marcus pulled out another photograph. A woman in her 50s, elegant and smiling, standing next to Danny at what appeared to be a charity gala. Margaret Fleming, age 53, married Danny, then calling himself David Fletcher, in 2019. She was found dead in her home 6 months later. Ruled suicide, but the timing was convenient. Her estate was nearly empty. Rob's hands clenched into fists. Danny wasn't just a thief. He was a predator who destroyed lives for profit. And now he had his sights set on Linda. Despite their bitter divorce, despite her betrayal with her personal trainer that had ended their marriage, Rob felt a surge of protective rage. Linda was Tyler's mother. She was family, and Rob protected family, even when they didn't deserve it. I want everything, Rob said, his voice carrying the deadly calm that his enemies had learned to fear. Bank records, travel patterns, associates, weaknesses. And I want it yesterday, already in motion. But Rob, Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. This guy is smart. He's been operating for 15 years without being caught. If he realizes we're onto him, he'll run. I know. Rob stood and walked to the windows, staring out at the city lights. But he won't run. Not yet. He's too invested in this score, and his ego won't let him believe I'm a threat. He thinks I'm the same stupid kid he betrayed in college. Rob's reflection stared back at him from the window, a man hardened by years of brutal competition, someone who'd learned that mercy was weakness and forgiveness was surrender. Danny Martinez had taught him that lesson 15 years ago, and now he was about to learn the consequences of that education. What's the play? Marcus asked. Rob turned back to his security chief, a cold smile spreading across his face. Danny wants to steal my ex-wife's money and disappear. We're going to let him think he succeeded, right up until the moment we destroy everything he's built, everyone he's hurt, and every future he thought he had. And if Linda gets caught in the crossfire? Linda made her choices. She chose to divorce me. She chose to take half my assets. And now she's choosing to marry a predator. But she's still Tyler's mother. Rob's voice carried the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "We save her from Danny, but we make sure she understands exactly who protected her. And more importantly, we make sure she understands what happens to people who underestimate a Castellano." The war was about to begin, and Rob intended to wage it on every front: financial, legal, social, and psychological. By the time he was finished, Danny Martinez would wish he'd stayed in whatever hole he'd crawled out of. And Linda would understand that her ex-husband wasn't just the man she divorced. He was the most dangerous enemy her new fiancé would ever face. Chapter 4. The Art of War. Rob's war room was a testament to methodical planning. In the 72 hours since Tyler's revelation, Marcus and his team had transformed the conference room adjacent to Rob's office into a command center. Wall-mounted screens displayed financial flowcharts, timeline graphics, and surveillance photographs. It looked like the headquarters of a military operation, which in many ways it was. Phase 1 is complete, announced Lisa Park, Rob's forensic accountant and financial strategist. A Korean-American woman in her early 30s, Lisa had earned her reputation by uncovering corporate fraud that others missed. "We've mapped Danny's entire financial network. He's sophisticated, multiple shell companies, offshore accounts, cryptocurrency wallets. But he made one critical error." She pointed to a complex diagram showing money flows between various entities. "He's been using the same digital signature pattern across all his identities. Same banking habits, same investment preferences, same timing intervals for large transfers. It's like a fingerprint." Rob studied the information with the intensity of a general planning an invasion. "Can we track his previous victims' money?" "Most of it, yes. He's been parking assets in a series of Swiss and Cayman accounts, but the patterns are traceable. More importantly," Lisa pulled up another screen showing recent financial activity. "He's already started positioning himself to access Linda's accounts. She's been moving money into joint investment vehicles he recommended." The manipulation was elegant and subtle. Danny was using his identity as a successful businessman to convince Linda to consolidate her assets for better investment opportunities. In reality, he was positioning her money for theft. Marcus approached the main table carrying a tablet. "We've got surveillance on his current residence, a penthouse he's renting under the Morrison identity. Expensive neighborhood, all paid for with previous victims' money. But here's the interesting part." He swiped to show photographs taken with a telephoto lens. "He's not working alone." The images showed Danny meeting with a woman in her 40s, blonde, attractive, wearing clothes that screamed expensive taste. They were embracing outside an upscale restaurant, their body language suggesting intimacy far beyond business. "Meet Patricia Novak," Marcus continued. "She's been with Danny for at least 3 years, possibly longer. Former model, now poses as his business partner. She specializes in befriending the wives, providing emotional support during the relationship-building phase." Rob felt his anger crystallize into something sharper and more focused. This wasn't just theft, it was a calculated psychological assault. Danny and Patricia were professional predators who destroyed families for profit. Where is she in the Linda operation? Already embedded. Patricia joined Linda's book club 6 months ago, positioned herself as a confidant. She's been encouraging Linda to trust her heart and embrace new possibilities. Classic emotional manipulation. The scope of the operation was staggering. Danny and Patricia had been preparing for over a year, carefully constructing the perfect trap. They'd studied Linda's psychological profile, identified her vulnerabilities, and executed a sophisticated long-term con. But they'd made one fatal error. They'd underestimated Rob Castellano. "Lisa, I want you to prepare forensic financial reports on every one of Danny's previous victims. Documentation that will hold up in court. Marcus, I need complete surveillance, 24/7 coverage, phone taps, if possible, financial monitoring. And I want background checks on anyone they've contacted in the past 6 months." "What about Linda?" Marcus asked. "Do we warn her?" Rob considered the question. Warning Linda would be the ethical choice, but it would also alert Danny that his cover was blown. The predator would disappear, and other potential victims would remain at risk. More importantly, Rob's revenge required Danny to complete his approach. Only when the man was fully committed, when he'd revealed all his methods and associates, could Rob destroy him completely. Not yet. Linda thinks she's in love, and women in love don't listen to warnings from ex-husbands they despise. Danny would convince her I was lying, trying to sabotage her happiness. We let them proceed with their plan until they're completely exposed. Rob walked to the window, staring out at the city where somewhere Danny Martinez was preparing to steal his son's mother's fortune. The irony wasn't lost on him. Rob was about to protect the woman who'd betrayed him from the man who'd betrayed him first. But this wasn't about Linda. This was about justice, about settling a debt 15 years in the making. Danny had taught Rob that loyalty was weakness and trust was currency to be stolen. Now Rob would teach Danny what happened when someone with unlimited resources and absolutely no moral constraints decided to wage war. "There's one more thing," Lisa said, pulling up a final screen. "I've been analyzing Danny's pattern of operations. Based on his previous timeline, he'll make his move within the next 2 weeks. The wedding is in 10 days. That's when he'll have legal access to Linda's assets. Then we have 10 days to prepare our trap." Rob turned back to his team, his expression carrying the cold certainty of a man who'd never lost a war he'd chosen to fight. Danny Martinez thinks he's the predator in this scenario. It's time to show him what it feels like to be prey. Chapter 5. Setting the Snare. The Harbor Club was Linda's favorite restaurant, an upscale establishment overlooking the marina where she'd often brought clients during her interior design career. Rob arrived 30 minutes early, choosing a corner table with clear sight lines to all entrances. He'd invited Linda to lunch under the pretense of discussing Tyler's upcoming school enrollment, but his real agenda was far more complex. Linda arrived precisely on time, as always. She moved through the restaurant with the confident grace of someone accustomed to being noticed, her emerald dress complementing her auburn hair perfectly. Rob stood as she approached, noting the slight tension in her posture. She was nervous about this meeting. "Robert, you look well." She accepted his gesture to seat her with the polite distance of former intimates who'd learned to navigate around old wounds. "As do you. How are the wedding preparations progressing?" "Wonderfully. David has been." She paused, searching for the right words. "He's been incredibly supportive, patient with all the details, understanding about my need to make everything perfect." Rob nodded, filing away her choice of words. Danny was playing his role flawlessly. The perfect fiancé who let his victim maintain the illusion of control while he maneuvered her toward financial ruin. "I'm happy for you, Linda. Truly. After everything we went through, you deserve someone who appreciates what he has." The sincerity in his voice seemed to surprise her. For a moment, the defensive wall she'd built around herself lowered slightly. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They ordered lunch and fell into the surprisingly comfortable rhythm of two people who'd once known each other completely. Rob asked about her design projects, her family, her plans for the honeymoon. He was charming without being intrusive, interested without being possessive. It was only when they were halfway through their main course that he made his first move. "I've been thinking about Tyler's college fund," he said casually. "With the market volatility lately, I'm considering restructuring some investments. Have you given any thought to his future financial needs?" Linda's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in her composure. "Actually, David has been helping me review my investment portfolio. He's had some excellent suggestions about diversification and growth opportunities." "Has he? That's generous of him. What kind of background does he have in finance?" "Import-export, primarily. But he's worked with investment firms throughout his career. He has a very sophisticated understanding of international markets." Rob nodded thoughtfully, mentally noting how Danny had positioned himself as a financial expert while keeping his claimed background vague enough to avoid detailed scrutiny. "Well, I'd be interested in hearing his thoughts. Perhaps we could all meet, discuss Tyler's future, ensure we're coordinated in our planning. After all, regardless of our personal history, we both want what's best for our son." The suggestion clearly made Linda uncomfortable. She'd spent 2 years keeping Rob and David in separate spheres of her life, probably at Danny's subtle insistence. I'm not sure that's necessary. David and I have everything well in hand. I'm sure you do. But Linda, Rob leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying just enough concern to plant a seed of doubt. Tyler is my son, too. I have a right to understand how his financial future is being managed. Unless there's some reason you'd prefer I not meet David directly, the challenge was carefully calibrated. Linda's pride wouldn't let her admit that her fiancé might have reservations about meeting her ex-husband. At the same time, Rob was positioning himself as the responsible father looking out for his child's interests. Of course not. It's just, well, you can be quite intimidating when you want to be. I don't want David to feel like you're judging him. Linda, I'm a businessman, not a monster. I'm perfectly capable of being civil to the man who makes you happy. Rob's smile was warm and reassuring. Besides, if he's going to be Tyler's stepfather, don't we owe it to our son to ensure we can all work together? The logic was unassailable, and Linda found herself nodding reluctantly. I'll talk to David about it. Perhaps dinner this weekend? Perfect. My treat, of course. Choose anywhere you'd like. As they finished lunch, Rob felt the satisfaction of a chess player who just placed his opponent in an impossible position. Danny would have to agree to the meeting. Refusing would raise suspicions and potentially damage his relationship with Linda. But attending would expose him to Rob's direct scrutiny, forcing him to maintain his false identity under pressure. More importantly, the meeting would give Rob the opportunity to begin the psychological warfare that would ultimately destroy Danny's carefully constructed operation. After Linda left, Rob remained at the table, making notes on his phone. The first phase of his counterattack was in motion. Soon, Danny Martinez would discover that some prey was far more dangerous than it appeared. Marcus called as Rob was walking to his car. We've intercepted communications between Danny and Patricia. They're accelerating their timeline, planning to move Linda's money within the next week, right after the wedding. Then we move faster. Is everything in place for Saturday's dinner? Affirmative. Audio surveillance, background support, and our financial specialist will be standing by. Danny's going to walk into the most dangerous conversation of his life. Rob smiled as he started his car. Danny Martinez thought he was about to pull off the perfect crime. Instead, he was about to discover that some debts never expired, and some enemies never forgot. The trap was set. Now all Rob had to do was spring it. Chapter 6. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. The Riverside Grill epitomized understated elegance. The kind of restaurant where deals were made over exceptional food and million-dollar handshakes happened over dessert. Rob had chosen it carefully. The acoustics would carry conversation while his surveillance team could maintain discreet coverage from multiple angles. He arrived early and positioned himself at a table with his back to the wall, a habit from his construction days when knowing who was behind you could mean the difference between life and death. At exactly 7 p.m., Linda arrived with Danny Martinez, now calling himself David Morrison. Seeing Danny in person for the first time in 15 years was like encountering a ghost made flesh. The man had aged well, his dark hair silver at the temples, his face carrying the confident ease of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. He wore an expensive charcoal suit and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Rob stood as they approached, extending his hand with the practiced charm that had closed hundreds of business deals. David, I presume. Robert Castellano. Thank you for joining us. Danny's handshake was firm, his eye contact direct, but Rob caught the micro-expression of recognition that flashed across his features, surprise, calculation, and something that might have been fear. The pleasure's mine, Robert. Linda's told me so much about you. All good, I hope. Rob's smile was warm and genuine as he helped Linda into her seat. Though knowing my ex-wife, probably not entirely. The dinner began with careful politeness, each man taking the other's measure, while Linda played the role of nervous mediator. Danny was smooth, deflecting personal questions while presenting himself as successful but not ostentatious, confident but not arrogant. Linda mentioned you're an import-export, Rob said as they studied the wine list. That's a fascinating business. What regions do you primarily work with? primarily Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. Electronics, textiles, some specialty manufacturing. Danny's answer was practiced, containing just enough detail to sound credible without being verifiable. Challenging markets. The regulatory environment alone must be incredibly complex. Rob selected a wine he knew cost more than most people's monthly salary. I've had some experiences with international business myself. The cultural nuances can make or break a deal. For the next hour, Rob played the perfect host, engaging, interested, seemingly impressed by Danny's carefully constructed credentials. He asked detailed questions about trade regulations, shipping logistics, and market conditions, watching as Danny navigated the conversation with increasing discomfort. The man was good, but not good enough. Rob had spent 15 years learning to read people's weaknesses, and Danny's tells were becoming clear. He touched his watch when lying, shifted his weight when uncomfortable, and his vocabulary became more formal when he was uncertain. "Tyler seems to have taken to you well," Rob said as their main courses arrived. "That's important to me. My son's approval isn't given lightly." Danny's expression flickered almost imperceptibly. "He's a remarkable young man, very perceptive for his age. He gets that from his mother, and perhaps from spending so much time around adults. He notices things others might miss." Rob cut his steak with surgical precision. Details, patterns, faces. Sometimes it's almost uncanny. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Rob was letting Danny know that Tyler might have recognized him, without making any direct accusations. It was psychological warfare at its finest, creating doubt and fear without providing a target for retaliation. Linda, oblivious to the undercurrents, began discussing wedding details. As she spoke about flowers and catering, Rob watched Danny's behavior carefully. The man was calculating odds, assessing risk, trying to determine if his cover was blown. "I understand he'll be honeymooning in Europe," Rob said. "That sounds wonderful. Switzerland is particularly beautiful this time of year." Danny's wine glass paused halfway to his lips. Switzerland, where several of his hidden accounts were located. It could have been coincidence, but Rob's tone suggested otherwise. "We haven't finalized our itinerary yet," Danny replied carefully. "Of course. So many options to consider. Banking capital of the world, I've heard. Very discreet financial institutions for those who value privacy." The conversation continued with Rob systematically probing every aspect of Danny's fabricated identity. He discussed import regulations that didn't exist, mentioned trade agreements that had been repealed, and referenced market conditions that were completely fictional. Danny caught some of the traps, but missed others, each mistake carefully noted by Rob for future use. As dessert arrived, Rob made his final move of the evening. "David, I have a proposition for you. I'm developing a new resort complex in the Caribbean, high-end, very exclusive. I could use someone with your international experience to handle procurement and logistics. The position would come with significant equity participation." Danny's eyes widened slightly. The offer was tantalizing, exactly the kind of opportunity a legitimate businessman would jump at, but also precisely the kind of exposure a criminal couldn't afford. "That's very generous, Robert, but I'm not sure my current commitments would allow. Think it over. No rush, though opportunities like this don't come along often." Rob's smile was predatory now, though still pleasant enough not to alarm Linda. "I've found that successful partnerships are built on trust and mutual understanding. Don't you agree?" Danny nodded stiffly, understanding that he was trapped. Accepting Rob's offer would expose him to scrutiny he couldn't withstand. Declining would signal that he had something to hide. As they prepared to leave, Rob shook Danny's hand again, holding it just a moment longer than necessary. "It's been illuminating meeting you, David. I have a feeling we'll be seeing much more of each other in the future." Walking to the parking lot, Rob felt the satisfaction of a predator who'd successfully stalked his prey. Danny Martinez now knew that his cover was blown, his operation compromised, and his enemy fully aware of his presence. The question was, would Danny run, or would his greed and ego convince him to stay and fight a war he couldn't possibly win? Chapter 7. The Walls Close In. Danny Martinez had always prided himself on knowing when to cut his losses and run. It was a survival skill that had kept him ahead of law enforcement and angry victims for over 15 years. But as he sat in his rented penthouse at 3 a.m., staring at surveillance photos of Robert Castellano, he found himself facing an impossible choice. Patricia Novak paced behind him, her usual composure cracked by fear and frustration. "We need to leave. Tonight. Rob Castellano isn't just Linda's ex-husband. He's a fucking predator in a business suit. I've been researching him since dinner, and this man destroys people for sport." Danny studied the financial reports spread across his glass coffee table. Linda's assets were finally within reach. Joint accounts established, investment vehicles in place, legal documents signed. They were less than a week away from the biggest score of their careers, and Rob's dinner invitation had been anything but coincidental. "He knows," Danny admitted, his voice carrying the bitter taste of defeat. "The Switzerland comment, the trade regulation questions, he was testing me, seeing how much I'd reveal. Then we abort. We've got enough liquid assets to disappear permanently. South America, Southeast Asia, we can vanish completely." But Danny's ego wouldn't let him surrender. For 15 years, he'd been the hunter, never the prey. Rob Castellano represented the one mark who'd escaped, the one debt that remained uncollected. Walking away now would mean admitting that his former college roommate had become more dangerous than him. Not yet. We're too close to the biggest payday of our lives. 52 million, Patricia. Enough to retire permanently. And if Castellano goes to the police? If he's been gathering evidence? Danny moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. Rob won't involve the police. This is personal for him, has been since college. He wants to handle me himself, which means he'll make mistakes. Emotional investment always leads to tactical errors. What Danny didn't know was that Rob's team had been monitoring his communications for days. Every phone call, every text message, every email was being recorded and analyzed. As Patricia and Danny debated their options, Marcus Wong sat in a surveillance van 3 blocks away, listening to every word. "Target is staying committed to the operation," Marcus reported through his encrypted phone. "Repeat, Danny Martinez is not aborting. He's planning to accelerate the timeline." Rob's voice came back cold and satisfied. "Perfect. Let him think he's still in control. What's his next move?" Based on intercepted communications, he's planning to convince Linda to transfer the remaining assets tomorrow morning. They're using some kind of urgent investment opportunity as justification. Then we trigger phase 2. It's time to show Mr. Martinez what happens when someone threatens my family. The next morning, Linda received a call that would change everything. Her bank's fraud detection department had identified unusual activity on her accounts, specifically large transfers being initiated by someone with access to her personal information. "Mrs. Daniels, we've detected attempted unauthorized access to your investment accounts," the bank representative explained. "Someone has been systematically gathering information about your financial holdings, apparently in preparation for a significant theft attempt." Linda felt her world tilting. "But that's impossible. Only David and I have access to those accounts." And she stopped, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. "Ma'am, we recommend you come in immediately to review the security logs. This appears to be a sophisticated operation, possibly involving identity theft and romantic fraud." Within an hour, Linda was sitting in the bank's fraud department, staring at computer screens that revealed the systematic manipulation of her financial life. Login attempts from IP addresses traced to countries she'd never visited. Investment recommendations that would have left her accounts vulnerable to drainage. Financial profile builds that read like intelligence gathering reports. "How long has this been happening?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Based on the logs, approximately 8 months. The activity intensified significantly after you added David Morrison to your accounts 3 weeks ago." Linda's phone buzzed with a text from David. "Darling, urgent investment opportunity. Need to move remaining assets by noon today. Trust me, this will secure our future." For the first time in months, Linda found herself questioning the man she'd planned to marry. The timing was too convenient, the pressure too intense. She thought about Tyler's strange behavior at the engagement party, Rob's pointed questions at dinner, and David's evasiveness about his background. Her phone rang, Rob's number appearing on the screen. For the first time since their divorce, she answered his call with genuine relief. "Linda, are you all right? You sound upset." "Robert, I think I may have made a terrible mistake." "About David. About everything. Where are you right now?" "The bank. They're saying someone has been stealing my financial information, planning to rob me. But David is the only one who—" Her voice broke as the full scope of her situation became clear. "Linda, listen to me very carefully. Do not go home. Do not contact David. Come to my office immediately. And Linda, bring Tyler with you. He's not safe either." As Linda hung up and called her son's school to arrange an emergency pickup, she realized that the man she divorced for being too controlling and ruthless might be the only person capable of protecting her from the predator she'd invited into her life. Danny Martinez had played his hand too aggressively, and now he was about to discover that Rob Castellano's patience had been a strategy, not a weakness. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Chapter 8: The Predator Exposed. Rob's office had been transformed into a crisis command center. Linda sat in a leather chair beside Tyler, both of them staring at wall-mounted screens displaying the evidence of Danny's elaborate con. Financial records, surveillance photos, communication intercepts, and background profiles painted a picture of systematic predation that left Linda physically ill. For women, Marcus Wong reported dispassionately. 4 documented victims over 15 years. Margaret Fleming died under suspicious circumstances after Danny drained her accounts. Janet Walsh lost her family business and committed suicide. Christine Moore and Sandra Bell survived, financially ruined and psychologically destroyed. Linda's hands shook as she reviewed the police reports and financial documents. Each victim had followed the same pattern. A successful, recently divorced woman who'd been systematically seduced, manipulated, and robbed by a man they trusted completely. "The Patricia Novak woman has been working Linda for 6 months," Lisa Park added, pulling up social media evidence. Book club meetings, coffee dates, shopping trips, all designed to gather intelligence and build emotional dependency. "She's done this before with the other victims." Tyler sat quietly beside his mother, his 13-year-old mind struggling to process the scope of deception they'd uncovered. "Mom," he said softly, "I tried to warn you. At the engagement party, I recognized him from old photos in Dad's college stuff." Linda turned to her son with tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me directly?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought Dad put me up to it." Tyler's observation was painfully accurate. Linda's distrust of Rob had made her vulnerable to manipulation by others. Rob remained standing throughout the briefing, his posture radiating controlled fury. Danny Martinez had spent months targeting his family, manipulating his son, and planning to destroy the mother of his child. The fact that Linda had betrayed Rob during their marriage was irrelevant now. She was family, and family was protected at any cost. "What do we do now?" Linda asked, her voice small and frightened. "The wedding is in 3 days. David expects me to transfer the remaining assets today. If you don't, he'll know we're on to him and disappear," Rob finished. "Which is exactly what we're going to prevent." Rob moved to the central screen, pulling up a complex flowchart that outlined the next phase of his operation. "Danny thinks he's closing in on the biggest score of his career. We're going to let him think he's succeeded, right up until the moment we spring our trap." The plan was elegant in its brutality. Linda would proceed with the asset transfer as scheduled, but the money would flow into accounts controlled by Rob's team rather than Danny's offshore network. Meanwhile, Rob's investigators would trigger coordinated law enforcement actions against Danny's previous crimes, freezing his existing assets and exposing his network of false identities. "But what about the wedding?" Linda asked. "He's expecting—" "The wedding will proceed as planned," Rob said coldly, "right up until the moment Danny Martinez is arrested for fraud, identity theft, and murder." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Rob wasn't just planning to stop Danny. He was orchestrating the man's complete destruction in the most public and humiliating way possible. Marcus pulled up another screen showing surveillance footage from Danny's penthouse. Target is growing increasingly agitated. We've detected multiple calls to offshore contacts, apparently preparing for a rapid exit strategy. But he's committed to staying until after the wedding. His greed is going to destroy him, Rob observed with satisfaction. Danny always had more ambition than sense. 15 years ago, he could have stolen 100,000 and disappeared. Instead, he got greedy and took everything. Now he's making the same mistake again. Lisa handed Linda a series of legal documents. These will transfer your assets into a protected trust structure. Danny will see the movement of funds he's expecting, but the money will be completely beyond his reach. Meanwhile, we'll be documenting his theft attempt in real time. What about Patricia? Tyler asked, showing more strategic thinking than many adults Rob had worked with. Patricia Novak will be arrested simultaneously with Danny. We've identified her role in the previous victims' cases, including her involvement in Margaret Fleming's death. She's facing multiple murder charges across 3 states. Rob watched Linda process the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. Her fiancé wasn't just a thief. He was part of a murder-robbery team that had destroyed multiple families. The wedding she'd been planning was actually an execution date for her financial life and possibly her physical safety. "I'm sorry, Robert," Linda said quietly. "For everything. For not trusting you about David, for not listening to Tyler, for all of it." Rob's expression softened slightly. "You don't owe me an apology, Linda. You owe our son an explanation for why you nearly married a predator. But that's a conversation for after we finish destroying Danny Martinez." His phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "Robert, thank you for the dinner invitation. I've been thinking about your resort proposal. Perhaps we could discuss it further this weekend." Rob showed the message to the room. "He's trying to get close to me, probably planning some kind of double cross." Danny always thought he was the smartest person in the room. "What do you respond?" Marcus asked. Rob's smile was absolutely predatory as he typed his reply. "Of course, David. Why don't you come to the wedding? I'll make sure it's a day you never forget." 3 days later, Danny Martinez would discover that some enemies never forgave, some debts never expired, and some predators eventually became prey. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The Fairmont Grand Ballroom was resplendent with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of elegant excess that spoke of unlimited budgets and meticulous planning. 200 guests filled the ornate space, unaware that they were about to witness the most elaborate takedown in the city's criminal history. Danny Martinez stood at the altar in his custom tuxedo, his smile confident and predatory as he watched Linda walk down the aisle. In his mind, he was moments away from legally accessing $52 million and completing the greatest con of his career. What he didn't know was that Rob Castellano had turned his wedding into a trap 15 years in the making. Rob sat in the 3rd row with Tyler, both of them wearing earpieces connected to Marcus Wong's surveillance team. Around the ballroom, federal agents posed as wedding guests, photographers, and service staff. Every exit was covered, every communication monitored, every aspect of Danny's network under simultaneous surveillance. "Target is at the altar," Marcus reported through their earpieces. "Patricia Novak is seated in the front row as planned. All assets are in position." Linda approached the altar with tears in her eyes, not of joy, but of rage and betrayal. She'd spent 3 days learning the full scope of Danny's deception, and now she was playing the final scene in his destruction. Her wedding dress was designer perfection, but underneath she wore a wire that was recording every word for the federal prosecutors waiting outside. The ceremony began with traditional elegance, the pastor speaking of love, trust, and commitment while Danny stood beside a woman he planned to rob and possibly murder. Rob watched with cold satisfaction as the man who'd taught him never to trust anyone was about to learn the consequences of that lesson. "Do you, David Morrison, take Linda to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the pastor asked. "I do," Danny replied, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a man who'd never been caught. "And do you, Linda, take David to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Linda looked directly into Danny's eyes as she spoke. "I do, Danny Martinez." The name hit Danny like a physical blow. His confident smile faltered as he realized his cover was completely blown. Around the ballroom, Federal agents began moving into position, their casual poses shifting into tactical readiness. "I think there's been some confusion," Danny said, trying to maintain his composure while scanning for escape routes. "My name is David Morrison." "No," Linda said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom through the concealed sound system. "Your name is Danny Martinez. You're a con artist, a thief, and a murderer, and your criminal career ends today." The ballroom erupted into chaos as federal agents revealed themselves, weapons drawn, shouting commands for Danny and Patricia to surrender. Guests screamed and dove for cover while photographers, actually FBI surveillance specialists, documented every moment of the takedown. Danny bolted toward the nearest exit, but Rob Castellano stepped into his path like a wall of granite and retribution. "Hello, Danny," Rob said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's been 15 years since you stole my money and ran like a coward. Did you really think I'd forget?" Danny's face contorted with desperation and rage. "You fucking psychopath. You orchestrated all of this." "I did," Rob agreed pleasantly. "I turned your greatest con into your final mistake. Every asset you've stolen, every identity you've hidden behind, every victim you've destroyed, it's all going to come out in court. You're going to spend the rest of your life in federal prison." Federal agents swarmed Danny before he could respond, forcing him to the ground while reading him his rights. Across the ballroom, Patricia Novak was receiving the same treatment, her carefully constructed facade crumbling as she realized their network had been completely compromised. "Danny Martinez, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, racketeering, and murder," the lead agent announced. "You have the right to remain silent." Rob knelt beside Danny as the agents secured him in handcuffs. "You taught me never to trust anyone, never to forgive betrayal, and never to show mercy to enemies. Thank you for the education. I put it to excellent use." As Danny was hauled away, screaming threats and curses, Rob felt the deep satisfaction of a debt finally paid in full. 15 years of planning, months of investigation, and 3 days of psychological warfare had culminated in the complete destruction of the man who'd betrayed him. Tyler appeared at Rob's side, his eyes wide with amazement and pride. "Dad, that was incredible. You destroyed him completely." "Yes, I did," Rob agreed, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. "And I want you to remember this lesson, Tyler. Loyalty is everything. Family is sacred. And betrayal is unforgivable. Anyone who crosses the Castellano family learns that some debts are paid in blood, reputation, and freedom." Linda approached them, still in her wedding dress, but now free from the predator who'd tried to destroy her. "Robert, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life." Rob's expression remained cold as he looked at his ex-wife. "I didn't do this for you, Linda. I did it for Tyler, and I did it because Danny Martinez owed me a debt. You were just collateral damage that needed protecting." The harshness of his words stung, but Linda understood their truth. Rob had saved her, but not out of forgiveness or residual love. He'd acted to protect his son and settle his own vendetta. She was alive and financially secure, but she would never again underestimate the man she divorced. As federal agents led Danny and Patricia away, Rob felt the completion of a circle that had begun in college. Danny Martinez was facing life in prison, his stolen millions forfeited to his victims, his network of false identities exposed. Most importantly, he would spend the rest of his life knowing that Robert Castellano had orchestrated his complete downfall. The wedding guests were evacuated while crime scene specialists documented the evidence. Rob stood in the empty ballroom with Tyler, father and son, united by the shared understanding that loyalty was everything and vengeance was absolute. "What happens now?" Tyler asked. Rob looked down at his son, the next generation of Castellanos, raised to understand that family was sacred and betrayal was unforgivable. "Now we go home, and we remember that some lessons are written in blood, and some debts take 15 years to collect." Danny Martinez had taught Rob Castellano never to trust, never to forgive, and never to show mercy. In return, Rob had given him a masterclass in why some enemies should never be made, some families should never be threatened, and some men should never be underestimated. The debt was paid in full. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.